Hi, my name is Pastor Rich Lancaster at Crossroads Baptist Church, and it is a joy for me to be able to share with you what an awesome thing that took place here within our youth ministry and our student ministry. And that is that Tommy Dimsdale came and taught a class, Courageous. And the purpose of the class was to remind not only the youth, but really the whole church, that this nation was founded for a divine and sovereign purpose. And so we had an opportunity to teach the youth, and Tommy did a great job of sharing with them how this nation was formed and how it is that the very principles that this nation was formed upon are biblical principles that come from the scripture itself. And I heard good reports from our youth. They enjoyed the class. They learned a lot. They even were ready to ask questions within the classroom when they go back to school and maybe hear a statement from one of the teachers that doesn't necessarily equate with truth and with what they've been taught at the church as compared to what's being spewed in our culture. And so I think it's awesome, and I think it helps them to understand the importance of Christians not only sitting in the pews on Sunday morning, but also becoming active in the political process and taking a stand for biblical Christian values, especially in this day. So very important. So I would highly recommend, if you're a pastor or a church leader, why don't you invite Tommy in? And I think it'll bless you, but even more so, it'll bless your church, it'll bless the youth, and I really believe it'll be an encouragement to those who participate. Hey, God bless. If you have any questions, you can always call me. Take care.
Washington was a deist, or Thomas Jefferson was an agnostic, or something like that. And we're going to go ahead and just give you the ammo to be able to combat anything that you hear and still get an A. So, of course, we're talking about our Christian heritage. I want, by the end of this, for you to really understand just how right you are in believing that we were founded a Christian nation. So, we've got the 5,000-year leap. We're not jumping into that this week. I wanted to go ahead and get here to do some really foundational stuff and let everybody see. Let me turn my clock on here real quick so I'm not going over time. Hang with me. But if you'd like to pick up a copy of the 5,000-year leap back there, we're doing them for like $5. That's how much I got into them. If you don't have $5, I don't care. Take it home and read it. I'm not keeping tabs on who paid and who doesn't. But it'd be nice to make a little bit back on that. But if you want to grab a copy, definitely do so. It's a fantastic book that talks about 28 founding principles of our founding fathers and just how much they really clung to their guns and religion. So just to get started, we're going to look at some statistics here. Right now, a couple studies, I've looked at 3 separate ones. The number of students who frequently attend church is down by 23% after college. That's a bad number, but if we go on, 59% decrease in students who check born again after 4 years in college. They ask them, what's your religious commitment? So on the way out of college, our young people are going in and they're Bible-believing Christians. When they come out, they're not quite as sure about where they stand just because of some of the things they've been told. And of course, if you go to an Ivy League school or something like that, you're definitely going to come up against some of these things. Even here in the upstate, I've heard a lot of horror stories from students. So, but if you learn some of the stuff we're talking about today, you make college really fun. It's going to be fantastic, and we're going to give you the ammo to do so. Only 20% of students who are highly churched as teens remain spiritually active by age 29. So that's an 80% drop-off. That's a big one. So something's going on. We're seeing something happen. Our kids are going into college, and right after that, we don't see them in churches again. They're not as sure about their Christian faith. So we're going to try to combat that. And what we're going to do is tell you why you should know, just straight from the Bible. 1 Peter 3:15, but in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. 2 Timothy 4:2, preach the word and be prepared in season and out of season. Correct, rebuke, and encourage with great patience and careful instruction. So obviously God is saying we need to know, why we believe what we believe. And that's what this class is going to do. But at the same time, I really want to highlight this. Do this with gentleness and respect, careful instruction, and great patience. So when we go in there, we're the shining light wherever we go. We have to exude Christ, because a lot of people are so caught up in being right and putting their ego into the situation that they just want to be right, and they don't change anyone's minds. Once we get a couple weeks into this, we're going to see exactly how to go in, ask proper questions, just pose the question in a non-confrontational way, and be effective in what you're doing. And today we've got a lot of stuff to cover, so I'm going to try to speed through as quick as I can. But in the subsequent weeks, we're going to have more discussions and stuff. I want to hear that from you. I definitely want to hear your ideas and maybe some of your experiences. And definitely, and if parents come, they can give their input too. We definitely love that. So, does anybody remember Kim Davis? Anybody heard of her? Okay, cool. She was a Kentucky clerk of court, and she was doing her job, and part of her job was to issue marriage licenses. So there was a homosexual couple that comes out of state, and they come into Kentucky because they hear that there's a Kentucky clerk of court who is not doing so for people who want to get married that are same-sex marriage. Well, they hear about this. They're actually already married. They come in, they want to stir the pot, and they want to attack a Christian. And so the Attorney General finds out about it, and she is, as you can see, she is put in jail. She stays there for about a week. That's happening in America right now. And thanks to Christians getting involved and Christians Lawyers Associations, we can see that she was able to be released afterwards. But this stuff is happening in America. It's not just happening in third world countries. Christians are under fire for their faith all across the nation. Here's one more. Coach Joe Kennedy. Anybody ever heard of that? We got some sports fans in here, I'm sure. All right. Well, Coach Joe Kennedy was a high school football coach, and he would go out. He had a very good habit of going out to the 50-yard line, and he would kneel down and he would pray. Thank God for the day, pray for the safety of his team, for good sportsmanship. But finally somebody said, no, they can't do that. That's separation church and state. So obviously the school gets entirate about it and says, no, you can't do that. Separation church and state says that you can't pray on public grounds. So in our benevolence, what we're going to do for you is we're going to give you a room off to the side, and we're going to allow you to pray. But there's two catches. No one can hear you, and no one can see you do it. And Coach Joe Kennedy, he wants to work with me. He says, okay, I'll go do what you want. So the next game, he's in this room, and he's kneeling down. He's beside his chair, and he's kneeling down. He's praying to God, and he starts feeling some of his heartstrings getting tugged. God's speaking to him. He's saying, this isn't right. What's going on? He's feeling he needs to go back out. He needs to proclaim his faith, and so he does. He goes out to the 50-yard line, as you can see right here, kneels down, and starts praying. He starts praying about the situation, and he feels his presence around him. And by the time he says amen, he looks up, and not only is his own team around him in solidarity of support, but the entire opposing team is out there with him. And that's amazing. That's what America is. But of course, because Christians, we've removed ourselves from the public sphere, he was fired right after that, and this past month they actually had a court case on that, and they upheld the school's decision to fire him for his religious beliefs. One more, Barronelle Stutzman. She was a Christian florist a couple years ago in Washington, and she ran Arlene's Flowers. And there was a homosexual man comes in, and she's done business with him before, and they're friends, like they should be, like we should be. We need to reach out to everyone. But at the same time, he comes in and he says, well, I'm getting married, and I would like you to do our wedding. And she says, well, listen, I love you in Christ. I want to support you however I can, but this conflicts with my religious convictions. Okay, that's fine. So she writes down the name of another florist that might be able to help him out, and he goes down the road. And we don't know how, but the Attorney General of the state found out about it, and they went after every single thing she had. She says, they want my home, they want my business, they want my personal finances as an example for other people to be quiet. The ACLU tried to get her to pay all of their legal fees, which was in the millions of dollars, which would have put her out of business forever. Luckily, some Christians did get involved, and she did just have a $1,000 fine, and she didn't have to pay any court fees. But we're seeing Christianity come under attack. And part of the reason is we don't understand. We've begun to believe the lie of separation in church and state. We're going to go into that just a little bit later. But I want to instill in you that we were born a Christian nation. What better place to start than Washington, our first president, all right? So he's inaugurated on April 30th, 1789. He's got his left hand on the 1767 King James Version Bible. And then he sets the precedence of "So help me God" to the end of his presidential oath. I want you to think about Washington. This guy, he's got every right in the world to be boastful, to be proud. He has led the Continental Army in the Revolutionary War to absolute victory against the biggest military power at that time. And people are still trying to get him to be king. They want him to set up a monarchy so he can be king. This is how much people trust him and rely on him. And this is how much we relied on him. But he didn't want to do it. I want you to imagine just the scene. This man who's larger than life, he's got this massive frame. He's big, he's barrel-chested, He walks into a room that sucks the oxygen out of the room, is what they said. And he reverently bows down and kisses the pages of the Bible. That doesn't sound like a deist to me, like you're going to be told. It doesn't sound like a deist. It sounds pretty religious to me. And then they opened the first presidential address with a prayer, and he led a crowd to St. Paul's Chapel where they prayed for hours after a sermon conducted by Reverend Samuel Provost on Psalm 144 to 150. Some say they sat there and prayed for up to 6 hours for the birth of our nation. He says, no, and real quick before I start that, if you notice right here, it says invisible hand. See how that's capitalized? He's always referring to God in that whenever when you see it's capitalized. He says, no people can be bound to acknowledge and adore the invisible hand which conducts the affairs of men more than those of the United States. Every step by which they've advanced to the character of an independent nation, so everything that we've done to be an independent nation that's got us where we are, seems to have been distinguished by some token of providential agency. So he's saying it seems like everything we've done right, God's had his hand on us right there. He says we ought to be no less persuaded that the proprieties or the favorable smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right which heaven itself has ordained. That's amazing. When I read this stuff, it just opened my eyes. I was like, wow, we really are right. We're on the right side of this. Now, this is what I call the law of liberty. This is my Benjamin Franklin. I think he's one bad dude. He's ready to smack down with somebody who don't like Constitution, right? He's ready. I don't know what yours looks like. This is what mine looks like. He says, only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become more corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. So if we wonder why we got all these laws, why recently the government's taken over 33% of our GDP by taking over the healthcare industry, or because we got all these laws that are against Christians right now, it's because we've removed ourselves from the public sphere. And when we do that, there's a vacuum there. The corrupt are going to feel that for sure. Corrupt and vicious. I think those are two words that you look at this last presidential election. Those are two words that probably describe it pretty well. Corrupt and vicious. And that's not how God has ordained us to go forward in our election processes. So this is the Northwest Ordinance, 1787. This was passed right after the Constitution was ratified. And it says right here, Article 3, religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools and the means of education shall forever be encouraged. So what's that saying? What's he saying that the purpose of our schools should be? To spread religion, morality, and knowledge. And today, a teacher can't even bring their own Bible into a public school. Washington was asked about this. He said, of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, everything that we do that's good, that makes us prosperous, religion and morality are indispensable supports. And let us with caution indulge the supposition. So he says, let's be careful when we start to think about the idea that morality can be maintained without religion. This is very important. This is what our founders understood. You have to have religion and you have to have morality. If you have one or the other, it's not going to work. If you just have religion, you end up with like the Roman Catholic Church. If they don't agree with how you're worshiping God, they can throw you into jail. And that's not right. That's part of the separation of church and state, where the church cannot have the sword, it cannot have prosecutorial powers or executorial powers. But at the same time, if you've got just morality, well, who's to say what's moral? Today we have it in a society where it's okay, in our public schools for Bobby and Sue to go to the same restroom, and that's moral in today's society because religion doesn't back that up. We haven't been there to instill religion in that. But that's part of the separation of church and state, because one thing, this is a recurring thing, in Romans you can look that God ordained 3 structures in the Bible. That's the government, the family, and the church. And there's certain things that those are not supposed to cross over lines. The government's not supposed to go into anything that the church does and hinder the church in any way. But at the same time, the church is not supposed to have to wield the sword. Does that make sense? Now this guy right here, I love some of his quotes. I had like 6 or 7, but we got to whittle this down for time. Alexis de Tocqueville. I've got his book back there. And we'll talk about this in week 3. We talk a lot about him, but there's just a few quotes from him. He was a French jurist in 1825. And he comes over to America from France because France is wondering, like, what's going on with America? Like, why in the world are they so prosperous? Why are they making so much money? Their taxes lower. The people are happier over there. And he writes back to him in Democracy in America and tells him why. He says, the revolutionists of America are obliged to profess an ostensible respect for Christian morality and equity, which does not permit them to violate wantonly the laws that oppose their design. So this kind of goes back to the law of liberty if you look at it. Under the law of liberty, it says, it's we're corrupt and vicious because we're not moral anymore. He's saying because they're moral, they don't need these laws. He says, thus, while the law permits the Americans to do what they please, religion prevents them from conceiving and forbids them to commit what is rash or unjust. We didn't need a king. We didn't need a lot of government telling us what to do, what we could do, what not to do, because we had it in our hearts. We had the Word of God in our hearts back then, and we knew what not to do. Around 1775, 74, there was a really big debate going on in the country at that time as to, can we do this? Can we govern ourselves? That's a big deal. This was a new idea back during that time. And they said, well, let's try it. So they started living by the 10 Commandments. And they found out that those 10 Commandments aren't just rules that a God up above wants you to follow, because if you don't, you're sinning. They started following those, and their lives became exponentially better. And that started making them want to get away from Britain. They didn't want all this high-class stuff. They wanted God. He said, I sought for the greatness and genius of America in her ample rivers, and it was not there. And Francis thinking, well, it's okay. It's not in her waterways. Okay, what is it? In her fertile fields and boundless prairies. And it was not there. And I think, come on, Alex. Really, like, it's got to be in their agriculture. There's agriculture everywhere over there. That's how they're making their money. He says, no. He says, in her rich mines and her vast world commerce. And it was not there. And they really think he's crazy by this point. So he says, not until I went to the churches of America and heard her pulpits aflame with righteousness did I understand the secret of her genius and power. America is great because she is good, and if America ceases to be good, America will cease to be great. I get chills every time I read that. That is such an amazing idea. Because I'm here to tell you, we put all of our faith in the political parties or maybe a political candidate. The Republican Party, the Democratic Party, Hillary or Donald Trump are not going to make America great again. It's not going to happen. Not until the churches get involved. The churches is what's going to bring our country back to God and back to that greatness that we once had. So you look at America's first Bible. This is something. If you want to make a liberal professor's head explode, you're reading this right here. It's awesome. So the very first Bible was printed in the United States in 1782 by a federally funded press in Congress. The federal government gave money to print America's first Bible. We couldn't print it in mass production back then because Britain wouldn't let us. And it says on the first page, it says a neat edition of the Holy Scriptures for our schools. And then it goes on to say, Congress has resolved that we recommend this edition of the Bible to the inhabitants of the United States. This is a blatant public proclamation that our people need to be reading the Bible. Now, the liberals can look at that and say, well, separation of church and state. No. This is how it was meant to be. I love this right here. I actually bought one. Does anybody know what this is called, or what they did call it? Pine tree flag, also known as Washington's flag. The cool thing about this is America's first war flag. That's what's neat. They got to thinking about it, and George Washington, being the activist that he commissioned the first 7 battleships of our Navy to fight the British. And we didn't have a flag. He didn't know what to put up at the mast. And up at the mast he put this, because he knew that the only way a bunch of ragtag rebels and farmers and merchants and blacksmiths would ever be able to go up against the biggest, most mighty military force of that time was what? What was it? And appeal to heaven. The pine tree, you're going to go into some cool history stuff today. The pine tree is on there because there was actually a legend before the colonists got here. They had some ancient Indian tribes. There were 9 of them that were warring together. They'd been killing each other for decades. And so they brought them, there was a peacemaker, brought them together at the Great Lakes. And the peacemaker said, go and bury your hatchets, bury all your weapons at the foot of this pine tree. And ever since then, that's been a symbol of peace. This was showing that we didn't want to go to war, but we're making an appeal to heaven for our rights. And that's also where you get the term bury the hatchet. So if you don't learn anything today, there's a cool little tidbit. So have you ever heard anybody say you can't do that at Separated Church Day? We hear about every Christmas time. Oh, you can't put a manger scene out there. It's in the public view. It's Separated Church Day. You can't do that. Well, the first thing that you would probably ask somebody who brings that argument to you is, well, where do you see it in any founding document? And they're not going to be able to tell you anything because it's not there. So we got to look at the origins of Separation Church and State. On November 7, 1801, we had the Danbury Baptist Church, and they wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson because they were really concerned about the Bill of Rights. Now, today, when I first read this, I was like, why would they have a problem with the Bill of Rights? Like, there's some really good stuff in there. You got freedom of religion, freedom of speech. You got, everything in there. All of your natural rights are in there, given by God. That's exactly why they didn't want it on paper. Because if you put it on paper, they said that it brings the importance of these rights down, because it looks like those rights are coming from government and not from God. So it's an entirely different way and aspect of how they thought about things back then. So Jefferson wrote them back explaining that there would be a clear wall of separation between church and state. Ever since 1947, that's been taken out of context and weaved to whatever the progressive agenda wants it to be. And this is a really good passage right here. King Uzziah of Israel. This is a perfect illustration in the Bible of what the separation of church and state is supposed to mean. So King Uzziah, if you ever lived in his time, you were probably well fed, well dressed. It was a time of peace, and if you did go to war, you usually won your battles, right? Does anybody have a Bible in here? Anybody want to look it up? I need somebody to read. Would you like to read? You read it? Who wants to read? Anybody? I'll read. You'll read? All right. 2 Chronicles 26, 16 through 20. Read from 16 to the 20th verse. This is really cool. I'd heard these stories, and when you actually start looking them up in the Bible and seeing that it's right there and it does make sense, it just blows your mind. Just how far on the right side of things we are. 2 Chronicles 26, 16 through 20.
Can I just read off the screen?
It's a little hard to read. I got a lot of text up there. I can go ahead and hit it though. But after Uzziah became powerful, his pride led to his downfall. He was unfaithful to the Lord his God and entered the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar of incense. Azariah, the priest, with 80 other courageous priests of the Lord, followed him in. They confronted King Uzziah and said, "It is not right for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord. That is for the priests, the descendants of Aaron, who have been consecrated to burn incense. Leave the sanctuary, for you have been unfaithful, and you will not be honored by the Lord God." Uzziah, who had a censer in his hand ready to burn incense, became angry. And while he was raging at the priests in their presence before the incense altar in the Lord's temple, leprosy broke out on his forehead. And when Azariah, the chief priest, and all the other priests looked at him, they saw that he had leprosy on his forehead, so they hurried him out. Indeed, himself was eager to leave because the Lord had afflicted him. What can we take out of that about the separation of church and state? We got any ideas? Well, we got to get some people talking. This is saying that the king was the government. And God ordained the three structures. You know, the government, the church, and the family. The government stepped into the role of the church. And as soon as government did, God afflicted him right there on the spot. Now, that's not more stark evidence that government is supposed to stay out of what the church is doing and allow the church to prosper the way they need to so they can help the poor and all this other stuff. That is right there. And it's another reason why the government has taken over the act of taking over the poor. All these entitlement programs, you know, you and I here, most people in this room, we're not going to see any Social Security. Who in here has a job so far? All right, you got your first paycheck, right? Good chunk of it was taken out. Uncle Sam got his cut, didn't he? I didn't like getting my first paycheck. I liked it, but it was not what I thought it was. So, in that aspect, the government has taken over the role of taking care of the poor, and they put extra burdens on the church for being able to do that. And now it's hard for the church to be able to properly take good care of the poor. That's why the entitlement programs that are helping some people out never work in the long run, because it's not making sense biblically. If it doesn't make sense biblically, it's not going to make sense economically.
Hey, Tommy, can I ask you a question? Because you brought up something that was, I think, one of the most important things that needs to be considered today.
Absolutely.
Separation of church and state. We get beat over the head with it. You referenced it back to Jefferson, I believe it was in the letter, right?
Yes.
The letter that Jefferson wrote.
Mm-hmm.
So, true or false, separation of church and state is in the Constitution of the United States.
It's not.
It's not.
It's false.
It's false. And yet here we are constantly being told that we are limited, the church is limited, and yet it simply comes from a fact that Jefferson was writing a letter to a church that was afraid, because the church had already been exposed to the powers of King George of England.
You got it.
And so the church there in Danbury said, hey, wait a minute, now how's this new thing going to work for us? And are we going to be limited again, just as we were in England? And Jefferson writes a letter back and he says, well, you're going to be protected because there is a wall that exists between the church and the state. There is separate. So the letter was to protect the church from the state.
Not the other way around.
That same letter, that same phrase is being taken out of context and used against Christians, against the church today. And what I see happening The church, Christians today, we fall right in line and say, okay, okay, okay. If we hear it loud enough, often enough, it's a lie. It's a lie. And yet Christians today, we believe that the Constitution literally says that. And it never does.
It does.
I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt.
Absolutely.
It's one of the most important things that we got to get right here
Well, if you
with the
look,
church in America today.
yeah, if you look, 1947 was the first time it was taken out of context. We're going to read through some of the damages that this has done to us, and you're just going to be just flabbergasted at just how rotten the public sector has gotten without our influence. So in 1947, it barred Christian parents from receiving tax benefits for sending their kid to a private school, that a Christian private school. Now, if it was a regular private school, they wouldn't have any problem to it. And they said, no, you can't do that. This is the first time we see government going from being supportive or even neutral to Christianity to actually hostile to it. It says the First Amendment has erected a wall of separation between church and state. That wall must be kept high and impregnable. 1967, we struck down school prayer. 1980, it said, now this is written on the documents, you can find it. It says, unconstitutional for students to see the Ten Commandments displayed in school, considering they might read, meditate upon, respect, or obey them.
Wow.
I think it's probably a good thing for us to have constantly in the public sphere. Don't steal, don't commit murder, honor your mom and dad, right? In 1993, removed the Ten Commandments from the county courthouse. 1994, students cannot openly pray at school events. Then 1990, Christian books, no Christian books in school libraries, and a teacher cannot carry a personal Bible with them at school.
Wow.
1979, it says it in the books too, unconstitutional for anyone to discuss whose birthday we celebrate on Christmas with kindergartners. Is that not crazy? Have we not left all realm of sanity here? And then you look, there's two other, real quick stories. Because the prosecuting attorney mentioned 7 words from the Bible, it was a 5-second phrase. The judge threw out the court case that was about to convict a man of beating a 71-year-old woman to death. He said, no, you mentioned the Bible, separate church and state, you're out of here. That's it. In Florida, a judge ordered the courthouse copy of the Ten Commandments to be covered up during a murder trial, lest the words, thou shalt not kill, allow the jury to be prejudiced against the defendant. We're living in insanity here. And part of it, a lot of it comes from the sin of inactivity, of us sitting back and not doing anything about it. And this is I never looked at this. I started studying, Numbers 20, and I finally figured out, man, this has something to do with it. He says, then Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, here now, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock? He's like, do I have to do this again? Like he's the one committing the miracle, but that's beside the point. And Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock with his staff twice, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank and their livestock. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe me to uphold me as holy in the eyes of the people of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given you. So who committed the wrongdoing in this instance? Moses, right. Now, who was held responsible?
Moses and all the people.
Moses and all the people. Moses, it said, and the Lord said to Moses and Aaron. Aaron's like, what did I do?
Yeah.
Why am I in trouble? I didn't do anything. I was just watching it happen. Like Christians, we watch things happen in our own world, and we don't step up and do those things, and the entire nation gets punished, such as Israel did. I heard a couple biblical scholars say that they've done some studies and found that they think that Israel went around in the wilderness for 40 years, never being more than a 7 days walk away from the promised land. And I just think, man, is that not indicative of America? That we're just 7 days, I guarantee you we're 7 days away from the promised land. If just 30% of Christians would just get involved and make phone calls and get virtuous men elected to office, good, godly men, and call your senator, or if yours is not, if someone represents you that's not a godly man, call him up and tell him how you feel, to try to change his mind. If we did that, I guarantee you'd see this nation turn around in 7 days. It'd be done. Because the Christian influence would be there. Now there are some pastors I've heard, and I want to go ahead and jump ahead of this before anybody has to wonder. There are some pastors actually preach against the Revolutionary War, saying it wasn't of God, because Romans 13 says, let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Now, obviously, if you look at this compared to the rest of the Bible, this verse is being taken out of context. Because I know if let's say you've got a homosexual couple that comes into the church, and that's okay, but they want to get married. They said, Pastor Rich, we're going to call it ACLU if you don't marry us, and if you don't do anything, we're going to throw you in jail. Pastor Rich is not going to go up there and be like, well, guys, come forward, Romans 13. You know, I said, can't they got us again? No, you're going to fight those things. You're not going to do those things. You're going to live by your convictions. So what this is actually talking about, back in those days, you had the zealots who didn't believe in government. You know, they didn't pay taxes or anything. Once again, God ordained 3 structures in our lives: the government, the church, and the family. And it's just saying that the government has to be an authority in there. And for God's people to flourish, there has to be that kind of structure. And ours, oddly enough, is a republic, which is the exact same style of government that they use in Israel, which is amazing. Martin Luther King Jr., he says, there was a time when the church was very powerful. It was during that period when the early Christians rejoiced when they were deemed worthy to suffer for what they believed.
Hey, Tom, excuse me real fast.
Yes.
These guys that are leaving for baptism. Michael, you got it?
Congratulations.
Okay.
That's great. Good. All right, cool. He says, it was during that period when the early Christians rejoiced when they were deemed worthy to suffer for what they believed. In those days, the church was not merely a thermometer that recorded the ideas and principles of popular opinion. It was a thermostat that transformed the wars of society. Now, I grew up in a house with my parents too. Everybody's got somebody in their house that says, oh, don't be touching that thermostat. You're going to run the power bill up, right? You don't have to. Okay, all right. Well, all right. The pastor did it, you're good.
I do that all the time.
When you got control of a thermostat in the house, you control everybody in that house, don't you? You control how they think of you. You control their mood. You control their power bill. You got a lot of control in that thermostat. As Martin Luther King Jr. was talking about, the church used to have that kind of control on the populace. He said, wherever the Christians entered a town, the power structure got disturbed and immediately sought to convict them for being disturbers of the peace and outside agitators.
Yeah. Hey, Tommy, let me speak to that if I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see, we're supposed to be talking, right?
Yes.
Let me tell you what happens today. When, as a pastor, if I walk into a room that's being led by government officials or as business leaders, many times, instead of where they once looked to the pastors and the spiritual leaders for guidance, now the attitude, unfortunately, in America today seems to be, pastors, thank you for coming to our meeting. You bless us with your attendance. Now go sit over in the corner and we'll let you know if you're needed.
Yep.
Which is exactly opposite of what Martin Luther King said.
And that's just an entire change in the culture right there. Thank you. Now, a lot of Christians do. 2 Chronicles 7:14, if my people called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. Now, this has been, everybody cites this verse. As every time election season comes up, and Christians start sharing this verse with one another. But the bad thing is, a lot of Christians say, if my people shall pray, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. This is about action. Prayer is an absolutely integral part to our walk in faith, and it needs to say so. So don't think I'm diminishing that at all, but let's take a look at this verse. If my people call, action, shall humble themselves, action, and pray. We've got prayer right there. Seek my face and turn from their wicked ways. So you've got 4 instances of action in this verse for every 1 instance of prayer. So whenever we get up off our knees after praying to God, that means God's hands and feet at that moment need to start moving. We got to start doing something. If His hands and feet don't move, it's not going to happen. Faith without works is dead. We have got to get into the public sphere, and we've got something actually really cool after church. From 2 to 3, this is something I invite everybody out to do. We're doing a pro-life sign wave out at Westside Baptist Church. If you guys want to come out there it's actually from 3 to 4, I'm sorry. And they'll give you signs and everything. And it's really cool. It's non-confrontational, but it just shows the upstate that we are still a pro-life community, and that's part of changing the culture. It should be a really fun thing. So I'll give you more information about that at the end. Satan doesn't want you involved in politics. He doesn't. He knows the influence that any one of you could have in this ring. All that's necessary for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing. I want to take an excerpt from a speech that Patrick Henry once talked about, and he was talking to the representatives in Philadelphia, and he was trying to get them saying, we need to go to war. It's time for us to do something. And it's so similar to what we see today. He said, they tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? Will it be next week or next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed or when a British guard shall be stationed in every house? Shall we gather strength by irresolution and inaction? Shall we acquire the effectual means of resistance by lying supinely on our backs and hugging the delusive phantom of hope until our enemies shall have bound us hand and foot? Sir, we are not weak if we make a proper use of those means which the God of nature hath placed in our power. We've got ways to change this around. We've got thousands of ways, and a lot better ways than this guy had. They were talking about going and dying for their country. We're just talking about going to a county council meeting. It's very simple. He said 3 millions of people, and even more now. There's more Christians than that. Armed in the holy cause of liberty, and in such a country as that which we possess, are invincible by any force which our enemy can send against us. Besides, sir, we shall not fight our battles alone. The battle, sir, is not to the strong alone. It is to the vigilant, the active, the brave. There is no retreat but in submission and slavery. Our chains are forged. Their clanking may be heard on the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable, and let it come. Repeat it, sir. Let it come. This guy's fired up for what he believes in, y'all. He's ready to go and die for his country, for something that's so easy for us to turn around. This guy's ready to give up everything he's ever lived for. And you know, I showed you these first 3 and even more ways that Christians are being attacked in America. The clanking of the chains can be heard from here. He says, it is vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace. Remember those Romans 13 passages I told you about? Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it that the gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. This guy's fired up about what he's doing. And it's time the Christians and the American church does the exact same thing. Stop buying these lies of separation between church and state. Once again, Satan does not want you involved in politics.
Politics or government. Government, period, or just active in social and cultural issues.
Absolutely. So I got one more thing here. I know there were hundreds of prayer proclamations that were made up, that they sent out with the first couple presidents. Hundreds of them. Of course, if you tell that to your college professor, they're going to want to see each one, and then they're not going to want to talk about it very much. And one of them, John Hancock said that I urge you by all that is dear, by all that is honorable, by all that is sacred, not only that you pray, but that you act. President Theodore Roosevelt, I don't agree with a lot of stuff he did, but he hit the nail on the head right here. He wrote a book called Fear God and Take Your Own Part. He said, but in addition to fearing God and prayer, it is necessary that we should be able to take ready and it is necessary that we should be able and ready to take our own part. The man who cannot take his own part is a nuisance in the community, a source of weakness, an encouragement to wrongdoers, and an added burden to the men who wish to do what is right. If he cannot take his own part, then somebody else must take it for him. I've seen time and time again. I've gone to the Tea Party meetings, and you've got a lot of women's meetings, across the state. You can be a guy and go to women's meetings for them, that's everything. So, and I've gone to all these activist training seminars and gone out and knocked on doors, and every single time it's the same people showing up. It's the same people, and they're tired. They've been putting up sandbags for so long, they're getting ready for the storm, and the storm keeps hitting and it keeps hitting, but no reinforcements are coming. This is a call to arms for the church to make this happen. Once again, Satan does not want you involved in politics. Why does he not want you involved in politics? He's taken the greatest weapon, government, and he is able to wield it against God's people. And so he's going to sit there and tell each and every one of you. I know what he's saying, probably 90% of the room. Now, some people are natural born leaders. They're ready to go right now. But 90% of the people, I imagine, are having this thought in their head. You can't do what he's saying up there. You can't go knock on doors. You can't go, join a phone bank and call people. People don't want to hear what you have to say. You're not the leadership type. You're not called to this. God said, occupy until I come. He wasn't talking about the church. He wasn't just talking about our homes. He wasn't talking about the ball games. He was talking about everywhere. And now the place that we have vacated from right now is the place that we need to be involved most. And of course, after this, you want to talk to me about how to get involved with some stuff? Absolutely, come up to me. I'll be ecstatic to tell you. But he's whispering lies in your ear right now. He's going to say you're not the leadership type. Maybe you've got some stuff in your past that you're thinking, I couldn't do anything because God wouldn't want to use me. God used Moses. Moses had a stutter. And then God sent him to go not just talk to a king, but threaten a king. Can you imagine? Some of us are nervous, and I still kind of get nervous every now and then, calling my representative up and telling him how I feel about something. Can you imagine going to a king and saying, let my people go? You got some guts, man. It's time the American people start getting the same thing. So if Satan's telling you that stuff right now, don't listen to it, because you can make a difference. I think John Birchside actually did a study, said for every one Christian that gets involved and is involved in a natural basis, they impact 500 people across their district. Can you imagine
Say that
the
again.
influence? If they impact 500 people.
One Christian?
One Christian.
Wow.
That's 500 votes right there that you can use to start turning this nation back. I'm going to close with this. There was one thing that inspires me is the fact that other people have, gotten involved in the past. They died for what they believed in, and I think, man, this is the least I can do. We've got it easy. All we got to do is make phone calls, knock on doors, browse a couple websites, get up to date on what's going on in the community. But these men right here, they were shivering, freezing. Some of them were having their feet rot off. There was blood coming out the bottom of their feet, and they were going across the Delaware River in 1776, December 23rd, to do a surprise attack on the nation's, on the world's greatest military force. So you got a night rider comes riding up, and he goes up to George Washington, and he hands him his pamphlet. He said, "This is from Thomas Paine, sir." And George opens it up, he flips to it, he reads it. He said, my men need to hear this. The courier turns around and he starts reading. He says, "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country, but he that stands by it now deserves the thanks of men and women. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly, and it is dearness only that gives everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price upon its goods, and it would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated." One last thing, I want you to know that I don't want to beat up on anybody for not being active. I know, you guys are young. It's probably the first time you're hearing about this, and I'm very glad. And thank you, Pastor Rich, for allowing me to take this this opportunity to talk to you. But if somebody ever asks you to get involved, or Pastor Rich asks you to do something for the church, or do something in the public sphere, or do something in government, they're not asking you to go die for your country like so many men have. They're asking you to go live for your country like so many people will. Like so many of you will. Yeah, we're done.
Okay.
Yes, sir. If you guys want